Hi. The other day, many of my viewers advised me to go and watch a video on the Spectre Sound Studios YouTube channel, where the host, Glenn Fricker, claimed that he had been in contact with Celestion and that they had confirmed to him that vintage greenbacks and vintage blackbacks are the exact same speaker. The only difference would be the color of the plastic cap. I should probably get the exact quote right here. He said, quote, "There is no difference between the greenback and the blackback. They are the same speaker," end quote. And, quote, "They just didn't have enough of those green rings laying around and they needed to get an order out the door," end quote. And he furthermore said that Celestion will back him up on this story. Now, the reason why I want to discuss this statement and why this is important is that I daily get lots of questions from guitar players who wonders how to get a certain tone. Some want to sound like Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page and, early 70s and so on. And some want to sound like AC/DC and so on. And I usually give them the advice to get a greenback with a pulsonic cone, because that's what they used back then. These speakers have become extremely expensive. I think it's at least $300 per element, per speaker. So for a musician with not that much money on his hands, probably have to get that investment right. Now I'm going to come back to the concept of the pulsonic cone in a while here. Celestion themselves refer to pulsonic cones in some of their speakers. For instance, here you can see the G1235XC, where they refer to pulsonic cones, and it's discontinued. And they have a bunch of other discontinued speakers, the Heritage Greenback series, which also had recreations of pulsonic cones. So we are obviously agreeing that there is such a thing as a pulsonic cone. Now let me share my knowledge here. All the names, people talk about pulsonic cones, RIC1 cones, and or R/C1 cones, and Kurt Müller cones, and so on. What those names refer to, I don't know. That's maybe folklore. It may refer to factories. It may refer to something else. I don't know. Celestion hasn't disclosed what factories they used throughout the 60s and 70s, and they have no obligation to either. So let me share what I do know, because I have a large empirical set of data here, which I rest my conclusions on. I've had the pleasure to play several hundreds of vintage Celestions throughout the years, and based on that, I have some findings. And this is all documented. My findings, though, pales in comparison to the work of Brian Harding at Bygone Tones. He has probably worked on thousands of vintage Celestions. He has categorized that and documented it, and on his site you can find lots of knowledge. But now let's check out what I have learned about vintage Celestion speakers. Basically, there were 3 different paper types in Celestion speakers. The first type, referred to as pulsonic, and as we saw earlier, also by Celestion, is a felt-like rough paper type with maybe some dark green color. And this you had throughout the 60s until 1973, and then the legend says that the factory burnt down with the formula in it. But I don't know if pulsonic refers to a factory or a brand, or if it's a made-up term by the community, or there's only speculations. But we've used that name to refer to this paper that you can see here in the picture. Then it kind of went away. There was in 74 and 75 some speakers which had this paper, could be found also. Now on Brian's website, Bygone Tones, you can see how you can identify this paper, both on visual inspection and also by the stamps used on this paper, and how to identify which years it is. The Celestion had certain specific date codes for that. So Pulsonic until 1973, basically. Then between 73 and 75, basically, what is found in most speakers then is a bluish, much not as coarse and felt-like as the previous paper, but more like cardboard or something like that, in a bluish hue. That one has been referred to R/C1. That's what's printed on the cone. Then from 1975 up until the 1980s, you have a gray, also kind of flat kind of paper, which is said to have supplied by the paper supplier Kurt Mueller. That also, there is no records of whether that is a new supplier or not. But that's what we find in speakers after 1975 and well into the 1980s. All these three sound very different. And within each group, within the Pulsonic group, the speakers are actually pretty consistent. I've done lots of studies on that, which I can share with you also. What it differs a lot is the dynamics. You know, these are old speakers. So some may be punchy and some less punchy, but the frequency distribution between what is referred to as Pulsonic cones is very, very good repetition. This, of course, is the opposite of what Glenn Fricker said, that the tolerances was all over the place. So there was, you know, as much difference between different vintage greenbacks as some different blackbacks. That is completely the opposite of my experience of this. Now let's have a sound sample here. You know, one sound sample of the first paper type, the Pulsonic, and one sound sample of the last paper, the Kurt Mueller. This is an 8-year-old video, but this really sums up what most greenbacks sound like compared to what most blackbacks sound like. So they could hear that the first type of paper has a more complex sound, more sparkle and so on, and it's a bit deeper. Whereas the blackback has more presence, but not that sparkle and that very high end. And if we're going to describe it artistically, I think Glenn had a point in his clip. The blackbacks, or I'm not going to use that word now since it's in dispute. The third type of paper sounds like early AC/DC, and the first type of paper sounds very much like Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix, that kind of style. Throughout the years, Celestion, as I have understood it, used all sorts of colors on their caps, but green was most common in the 60s and early 70s, and then cream was the most common between basically 73 and 75, and then black was the most common. And that has led to the names greenback, creamback, and blackback in popular culture or in the forums. Greenback has kind of been the name for pulsonic cones, or what we call pulsonic cones. Greenbacks for R/C1 cones, and blackback for Kurt-Müller cones. But as you can see here, 1 year a greenback could have any of these 3 cones, and you could go to any year. I mean, you could go to the year in the 60s, and a greenback could turn up. I have silverback speakers with pulsonic cones. So the plastic cap is just a proxy here. It has no meaning. So it's an unfortunate name, and it's probably part of the confusion. It could be that this paper was created by one single supplier all the time, based on the same specification from Celestion, and that the difference in the actual outcome, the outcome that I and also Bygone Tones has recorded in our empirical studies, that went, it went past Celestion. They didn't notice it. They just sent out their specifications to the supplier of these speakers, and they just delivered. And I'm sure someone could try to argue that well, in the 70s, these 3 papers were the exact same, but they have aged in different ways. So they sound like they do now, but back then they all sounded the same. But that can easily be debunked, actually. I mean, the reason why we are interested in vintage greenbacks, blackbacks, and greenbacks, or these 3 tones, is the recordings. When the speakers were new, albums were recorded with these speakers. So we know that they sounded like this back then also. That's why they're attractive today. They wouldn't be interesting at all otherwise, actually. So we can be pretty sure that the paper is different now, but it was different back then as well. All right. Well, I'm sorry about the somewhat lengthy explanation of what I bet most of you think is a really narrow subject. But I think this is pretty important. These speakers are regardless of what amp you play through them, they have a very distinct tone, and they have an important place in music history. So my question to Celestion is do you stand by what Glenn Fricker is claiming in his video? And how do you define a pulsonic cone? And how long did you use pulsonic cones in your speakers in the 70s? That would be highly appreciated. All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. Cheers.